It's time to reboot your credit card with Apple Card. Apple Card gives you unlimited cash back every day on every purchase. It's real cash you can spend right away. No need to wait and wait for rewards. Apply now in the Wallet app on iPhone to see your credit limit offer with no impact to your credit score. Subject to credit approval, daily cash is available via an Apple Cash Card or as a statement credit. See Apple Card customer agreement for terms and conditions. Apple Cash Card is issued by Green Dot Bank, member FDIC. Accepting an Apple Card after your application is approved will result in a hard inquiry, which may impact your credit score.
I'm Stephen Metcalf, and this is the Slate Culture Gabfest M3GAN Goes to Camp edition. It's Wednesday, January 11th, 2023. On today's show, the horror movie M3GAN is being called, that, by the way, is spelled with the digit 3 where the E would appear in the name M3GAN. It's being called an instant camp classic. It's about an AI-infused robot companion to a young girl grieving the loss of her parents. We will discuss, and then another annual trad here at the Gab, a beloved one, I'd say, by me, the Movie Club, as always anchored by Slate's own Dana Stevens. And finally, I'm calling it early. I don't need to even discuss it. Carolina Miranda's piece in the LA Times is the definitive take on TikTok, a tremendously good essay. We're psyched to have her join us to discuss the algorithm as existential mirror. But first, joining me is Julia Turner, the deputy managing editor of the LA Times. I assume the assigning editor to that piece.
I don't know if I'm the assigning editor, but I'm a goading force for it, I would say.
Fair enough.
She's the J.K. Simmons from the Spider-Man movie, barking from behind the desk.
Where's your TikTok piece? Basically.
That's funny. As long as you're not J.K. Simmons from the drummer movie. What was that?
Whiplash?
Yeah, Whiplash. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, okay. Good to know. And of course, Dana Stevens is the film critic for Slate. Hey, Dana.
Hey.
Am I correct that the two of you are seated actually physically next to one another?
Eyes a twinkle above a sea of podcasting gear. Missing you.
Oh, my God. FOMO.
Dana's got some charming turquoise rickrack atop her amusingly sleeve-buttoned reddish-gray shirt. There's sartorial delights. There's an apple on the table. Wow, it's good here, Steve.
So J.K. Simmons from Whiplash it is then. All right. Shall we make a show?
Yeah. Let's do it.
Well, why not, right? M3GAN is the new Blumhouse horror pick. It stars Allison Williams as a toy developer whose specialty is getting AI technology into companionable little robot pets. But she and her dev team have gone rogue and created M3GAN with a 3 where the E should be, an AI-infused humanoid companion. And this she beta tests on her niece. Her niece is now under her care following the death of her parents. And she's desperate for the solace of companionship, which she's actually not getting from her aunt. So what could go wrong here? The movie also stars Violet McGraw, and both Amy Donald and Jenna Davis, one the voice, one the body, as M3GAN, the little humanoid creature. Let's listen to a clip. And the clip we're about to hear, we hear Gemma the aunt, Katie the little girl, and M3GAN the robot. They're all at a dinner table, and Katie's refusing to eat her vegetables. And Gemma and M3GAN kind of get into it over parenting, and then Gemma, you'll hear, turns down the volume on M3GAN. So check it out. Let's listen.
You have to eat the toppings, Katie, not just the bread. You just did the one thing I asked you not to do.
Research shows that if you force a child to eat vegetables, then they'll be less likely to choose those foods as adults.
Is that so?
Yes. Experts say the preferred method is to give your child the choice. It's called the division of responsibility.
So we need to talk about school.
Can I bring M3GAN?
Katie, you know that's not possible.
Then I'm not going.
Oh, come on, Katie. Hey, I'm sorry. Let's just talk about it. Hey.
Let me go.
Whoa. Hey, what's going on? Hey, Katie.
Go.
What are you doing? Stop it. Katie, calm down.
Let her go.
Oh, my. Data, this movie's kind of blowing up on Twitter and TikTok. It's classic Blumhouse marrying the horror genre, like a crisp 90 minutes of genre thrill seeking with kind of juicy topical idea, in this instance, AI going rogue. What'd you make of it?
Yeah, this movie really has, for a January release that's a small, low-budget horror movie, it's done incredibly well. And at the box office, on social media, you really can't, the trailers are everywhere. You can't escape that dancing creepy doll everywhere you go.
Highest grossing early January movie of all time.
Is that true?
Yeah, it's the highest total ever for this particular weekend, which, is the weekend after all the Oscar movies come out where nobody ever releases anything. But,
right, but all the more reason
hey.
that if you want to go to the movies, this is apparently the thing to see right now. It also is typical Blumhouse in that it's a high margin, high profit kind of movie. I think it cost $12 million to make, and it's already made over $30 million after one weekend at the box office. So all of that said, I think I walked into it with a couple of thoughts. For one thing, I was really not in the mood for extreme gruesome scares, so I actually went to Slate's dependable scaredy scale feature, in which we rank according to other well-known scary movies where the chills and the gore fall in various releases. And I was pleased to see that this ranked around Beetlejuice level. So totally I could go see it alone at night, as I did last night, and not walk home feeling like I was, about to be murdered or haunted or something. This is one thing that I loved about M3GAN. First of all, let me just say that I absolutely loved M3GAN. It was so much fun. I suppose that you could poke holes in it, but why would you be so uncharitable towards a movie that gives you so much laughter, such judiciously arranged chills, and I thought actually some really good character moments as well, which we can get into. But yeah, this is a PG-13 movie, which I think some horror aficionados are complaining about, that it doesn't contain enough scares, that it could be gorier, that the kills could start coming a little sooner in the movie. I don't think there's really an act of violence until over an hour into this, 100-minute or so movie. But I think the PG-13 rating is great for a couple of reasons. Teenagers can go see this movie now easily, and I think it's the perfect kind of, young teen date movie. It's not going to haunt your dreams forever, but it will make you squirm and scream while you're watching it, and you'll have lots to talk about later. And it's got a lot to say about AI and about parenting and about technology and our relationship to it as children, as adults, our relation to horror movies and what we expect from them. It's not one of those profound horror movies with sort of deep psychological implications about or sociological implications about allegories about everyday life. It is just more scary robot kills people, but it pulls that off just so satisfyingly. And everybody in the theater I saw it in with last night completely agreed. There was lots of squealing and squirming and excited conversation on the way out. So yes, M3GAN to me is a very auspicious beginning of the year at the movies, and I would send people to it with a full heart.
Okay, so in true Blumhouse fashion, Dana has grown a third thumb out of her forehead and it's sticking straight up. But Julia, this is that's a rave from Dana comparatively. What would you make of this?
I also really enjoyed myself at the movie theater. Among the things I liked were the relative lack of gore and gruesomeness for a long time. I liked the PG-13-ness of it as someone who does not love to be horrified at the movies. And I liked the subject matter, which is, what does it mean to parent in an age where technology can help you parent? And let's take that anxiety of parents and just sort of play with it and make some weird warbly, wobbly, eerie music out of it. Great, good scenario. I agree with you, Dana, that this is not Get Out. This is not a movie that's using the tools of horror to actually say something profound or surprising or interesting about parenting or revolutionize your thinking about technology and parenting in modern life. It's putting those anxieties in a blender to make a fun horror movie.
Yeah,
I think
but it doesn't put on airs, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, but just to clarify, its ambitions are lower, and sometimes I think you can feel the 12 million-ness of it. It's it feels modest in some ways, but it's just really fun and funny how it unspools itself. And I also really enjoyed Allison Williams' turn as the aunt turned, reluctant mother figure. She's really, beginning to make a career out of being sort of the dipshit lady in the horror movie. I mean, she gets a little less dipshitty as the movie goes along, but
she's perfectly cast in this because I was thinking that she has a bit of an AI quality as well, right? There's something about her perfectly symmetrical face and kind of all-American white girl beauty. Obviously, Get Out used that to very eerie effect.
Right.
In this movie, too, she's not a bad guy, but at the beginning of the movie, she is a pretty cold guardian, right? I mean, the movie opens, and this isn't spoiling much because it happens, I think, even before the credits of the movie. She becomes the guardian of her niece because both of her niece's parents are killed in a car accident. So there's this really pretty traumatic beginning where this young girl who's supposed to be, I think the actress who plays her is a bit too old for the part. She's probably about 11 and she's supposed to be 8 or 9, I think. But, you know, she's very lonely and depressed and grieving, and her aunt is kind of a cold fish. And I think the movie really sets out the bleakness of the little girl's situation at the beginning pretty starkly.
Yeah.
Right. And thematically, that's very rich. Like what it makes of it, I'd like to explore a little more. But first, to be clear, I really did enjoy myself for this movie. I love the tidy 90 minutes. I love that it doesn't sprawl. It doesn't crawl up its own yin-yang. Very nicely delivered. I recently saw the Knives Out sequel, which is effectively a terrible movie, in a crowded Brooklyn movie house on Thanksgiving night with a bunch of friends and a lot of beer. And it was incredibly fun, even though you could tell critically it was just a total failure. And this was the exact opposite. I saw this in a completely emptied out movie theater in rural upstate New York. Nobody was there. And the camp aspect landed, but it landed on me alone. And it would have been so enhanced by the gales of laughter from a similarly semi-drunk full movie house. And I appreciated that, but I was a little distanced from it. So I don't think I loved it as much as you guys did. But by and large, I mean, Blumhouse has a wheelhouse, right? And the unerringness with which they smack it out of the park is really impressive. And they've done it again. This is going to be probably their biggest hit, or certainly one of them, and deserves to be. It's just so tidy, Dana, that I needed to, listen, just personally, for me, I thought with just a little bit, like a little more, they could have taken the niece-aunt relationship out of the generic and pushed it not in the direction maybe of Jordan Peele, not some like huge sprawling thematic consideration of the state of the American soul, but sort of in the direction of The Sixth Sense, right? Like where that relationship between mother and son is so painfully real. That's what that makes that movie really work and as a kind of almost a lasting contribution to the genre. Or The Exorcist, right? It's like the despair of a parent, right? And obviously you can't do that exactly because she's cold. The whole point of the aunt is that she's a totally cold guardian who's as robotic as her own creation, right? Which I think lands as a satire. But Danny, you said something I really want to pick up on. You said it did get at this about these issues of cyborging out our own soul to our electronic creations. Talk a little bit more about that, maybe.
Well, I mean, it's a really primary concern of the movie. The very first thing you see is a fake ad for these creatures called perpetual pets, because I don't know if we mentioned that that Allison Williams' character is a toy designer, right? Well, that's how she comes to design M3GAN in the first place. But before M3GAN is designed, or at least before she's launched, okay,
I did my job.
She is creating these sort of Furby-like things called perpetual pets, which you see the little girl playing with in the car right before the car accident where her parents die. And it's a really depressing toy, as the parents observe. It's just essentially a kind of remotely manipulated mechanical pet that you just feed fake pellets over and over until it poops out little plastic turds or something. And there's kind of a conversation about how pointless this toy is. And the little girl herself later on says that toy is horrible, right? So there's a kind of critique of consumerism and of electronic babysitting before the movie has even begun. And yet this figure of M3GAN, the robot doll, occupies this different kind of space. She's both seen as better than the perpetual pets in terms of the emotional support she offers the child, which is in fact given almost as a selling point on the market, right? There's a very cynical ad that uses the little girl's grief as a way to sell the toy. But of course, as you said, Steve, she's also a Frankenstein figure who very quickly outstrips her own creator and starts to take on her own sentience and, want to be her own primary user, as she says. And It's not a Luddite movie, and it's certainly not a blindly pro-technology movie. I think it walks that really well. And we haven't mentioned the screenwriter yet, but I feel like this is one of those movies where the screenwriter should be mentioned because she's kind of the hot new thing in genre writing. Her name's Akilah Cooper. She's already written a low-budget horror movie called *Malignant* a couple years ago that was a big hit as well. And I think she's writing something called *The Nun* too. I haven't seen *The Nun* 1, so I don't know the nature of that, but I think it's horror as well. But I think this is a movie that really lives and dies on its script. It's not about the special effects. The doll is very effective, but she's not CGI for the most part. My impression is that it's a combination of puppetry and prosthetics used on a real girl, Amy Donald, the dancer, the child dancer who plays her, who physically plays her, not vocally. That effect is great, but that's not the point of seeing the movie. What you're really there for, as we've been talking about, I think, is just the tautness of the story, And even though the beats are predictable, I mean, it's a genre movie, right? Like, of course, that when some jerky person appears on the periphery and starts to mistreat the little girl and her aunt, that they are probably going to be the next bait for M3GAN, the evil dancing doll. But watching the way those things unfold and the rhythm with which those beats are dispersed is just, it's really skillfully and pleasurably done. So bravo to Akilah Cooper. I want to keep on seeing what she writes.
I do think the other thing that Cooper does so well here, and part of what carries you through the ride, is that the parenting ideas are interesting, right? Like even M3GAN the doll isn't an evil doll, what the doll has been programmed to do is to protect their partner child at all costs. And so it ends up becoming it's almost more like a commentary on helicopter parenting than a commentary on AI. It's sort of like, okay, so if you take that impulse to the ultimate extreme and you try to protect your child from all potential possible harm in a no holds barred fashion, like what do you get? Like violence and mayhem and, a child who is like stunted and incapable of real emotional development. Like, that's so much more interesting than Chucky to me. I mean, I don't know. To be fair, have I ever seen a full Chucky movie? I don't know. So apologies to Chucky if in fact Chucky is raising similarly interesting questions.
I will say, if you're putting off seeing this movie because you think like I've seen the evil doll movie already or I know that trope. I mean, I have seen at least the first Chucky long ago, and I do think that this goes to different 21st century places. It's not what it seems to be from the commercials, but the commercials are very effective too. The commercials make this look like it's going to be some extremely scary, almost like The Ring, right? I mean, the uncanny way that the doll moves. You think it's going to be like one of those extreme horror movies. That is not the vibe of this movie at all. And it earns that moment. It takes us a long time to get to the moment when, she's doing her strange contortionist dance, but it's really worth the ride.
Okay, all right. That's three thumbs up with degrees of enthusiasm, but check it out, M3GAN, and shoot us an email. We'd love to hear what you think about this movie. Let's move on. All right, now is the moment in our podcast we talk about a sponsor. Dana, what do we have?
Steve, we really are in a new golden age of TV. There are so many great shows to watch and talk about right now. We talk about some on this show every week. Are you watching Love is Electric or For All Who Charge? Well, if you haven't heard of these shows, you're not alone because they're not TV shows. They're EV shows, shows about electric vehicles. And you can find them all at sceneonev.com. On sceneonev.com, you can learn that EVs have a dependable range and most EV models can travel 200 miles on a fully charged battery. EVs can be charged at home or at thousands of DC fast chargers nationwide. Did you know there are electric SUVs, sedans, hatchbacks, trucks, and more, right for just about any lifestyle? EVs produce zero tailpipe emissions so you can live more sustainably. Credit, rebates, or tax incentives may help make EV ownership more affordable. Electric vehicles are worth watching. So head to sceneonev.com to learn more. That's sceneonev.com. Stream on. It's time to reboot your credit card with Apple Card. Apple Card gives you unlimited cash back every day on every purchase. It's real cash you can spend right away. No need to wait for rewards. Apply now in the Wallet app on iPhone to see your credit limit offer with no impact to your credit score. Subject to credit approval, daily cash is available via an Apple Cash Card or as a statement credit. See Apple Card Customer Agreement for terms and conditions. Apple Cash Card is issued by Green Dot Bank, member FDIC. Accepting an Apple Card after your application is approved will result in a hard inquiry, which may impact your credit score.
All right, now is the moment in our podcast we discuss business. Dana, what do we have today?
Steve, our only item of business this week is to tell listeners about today's Slate Plus segment. We've been on a roll of good listener questions. Maybe that's because we recently had our listener call-in show, and we had lots of good questions come in for that, more than we could answer. This week's question is from a listener named John, who writes, "Hey guys, I've noticed that this year I've enjoyed Dana's negative movie reviews more than anything else I've read." Thank you, John. "Because I know how optimistic and positive she usually is," he should see me off mic, "I appreciated the genuine dislike rather than her just dunking to be mean. It made me wonder, as critics, is it more fun to bash something?" This is actually I feel like this is a common cocktail party conversation among those who write criticism or are curious about writing criticism. As a cultural critic, is it fun to dislike something? Obviously, pans often get more clicks than any other kind of reviews, and it's almost harder in a way to get people interested in really sincere raves about something. So I think that could be a fun topic for us to discuss in Slate Plus this week. If you're a Slate Plus member, please stick around for that segment at the end of the show. And if you're not a Slate Plus member, you can sign up today at slate.com/cultureplus. When you're a member of Slate Plus, you get ad-free podcasts. So no ad reads whatsoever. You get lots of bonus content like the segment I just described, which exists on plenty of other podcasts as well. And of course, you get unlimited access to all of the great writing on Slate. I should also mention that when you sign up for Slate Plus, you are supporting our work and the work of all our beloved colleagues. These memberships are really important for Slate. So please, if you haven't already, sign up today at slate.com/cultureplus. Once again, that's slate.com/cultureplus.
All right, well, Dana Stevens, you, as I've discovered over the last 15 or so years, are a woman of funny little hates. Beneath that Mary Poppins, twee, Berkeley grad student surface, you hate games, anniversaries, and best of lists. And the Slate Movie Club is really all three when you look at it, and, which is why I love it. So here we are. This is another one of the annual rituals we have at the show. But before we really dive in and get into the meat of it, Dana, why don't you just explain to our listeners what the Movie Club is?
Movie Club is it's a feature that pre-existed me at Slate, but that I was very happy to become the leader of when I became Slate's movie critic back in 2006. It's just an end-of-year roundtable about the year's movies where I invite 3 or 4, it was 3 this year, other critics from different publications. We share our 10 best lists of the year, and then we just start a long conversation. It runs over the course of a whole week. It's usually about 20 to 25 total posts over the course of that week, in which we don't review movies. It's kind of a relief to not have to, do the review dance of not spoiling and deciding if you like it or not. We just really get into the weeds about the year's movies. We might be a whole post about, one scene that you loved, one performance that you hated, one trend that you couldn't get away from. And it almost always goes really unexpected places. To me, it's just a chance to kibitz with some of my favorite other writers on film for the year. And it usually runs, and this year it did as well, the year between Christmas and New Year's.
Can I tell you guys a hidden secret of my history with Slate?
Please.
Oh my gosh, yes.
My job application to Slate, my cover letter that I sent to David Plotz in 2002 was about how much I liked the Slate Movie Club.
Oh, that was before I was even a part of it. That's great.
I know. It's a great format because because it allows critics to argue, which obviously is a format that we enjoy on this show of critics arguing. But it allows you and the people you convene to engage with the work in such an interesting way. And I appreciated your request for someone to make the passionate case for why the ending of Nope made sense. And I will not call out by name your interlocutors, but there were some defenders, but not any, who quite mounted the actual explanation that I was looking for. There were some people who were like, it worked for me, but I wanted them to say why.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's kind of the point of Movie Club, I think, in a way, is that it's playful and it's a chance to do things like that, to say hey, I've read all your reviews of Nope. I know whether you liked it or not. I just want you to explain to me what the vertical tennis shoe was doing in the flashback, which I will notice that no one picked up the gauntlet and explained that part of the movie to me. Yes, that was my opening post this year, was essentially, here's a movie this year. I was sort of writing about disappointments of the year. And Nope was a complex disappointment because I'm really glad I saw it, loved the first hour of it, still think about it often. But, did it end up on my 10 best list or be a movie that will stick with me as one of the greats of 2022? No.
Yeah, I also love that it lets you survey the year. I mean, I always learn about a ton of movies that I should see and have not yet seen, despite the fact that we basically watch a movie every week for this, and we spend some time each week looking at all the movies we could be talking about and then picking which one to talk about, like still. And somehow, particularly this year, I felt like there were a lot of smaller international or independent films that were mentioned that I weren't even on my radar as things I haven't seen yet, including Athena and I think St. Omer were two films that I came away feeling like, oh man, I've got to see those.
Well, this year in particular, and this came up again and again in the club because it's impossible to talk about the movie landscape right now and not talk about this, but release strategies have just become so confusing for new movies. I mean, it's not at all surprising that two foreign films like Athena and St. Omer would go under your radar, and I guess that could have happened in the pre-streaming and pre-COVID days as well, but complicated by, the sudden burst of streaming channels and, theaters being in danger because of COVID, et cetera, it's really almost impossible to keep track of most new movies that are released now. I mean, I see probably 200 movies a year or something like that. Not all new, but combined, I would say that I probably see. I actually talked about this with our editor, Dan Coyce, because at one point I said hundreds of movies later, and he was querying me like, hundreds? Don't you mean scores? And I proved to him mathematically that I probably see somewhere between 150 and 200 movies every year. And yet, I hadn't seen a whole bunch of the stuff these people were talking about either, and in some cases had not even heard of them because, things are released on, bespoke little streaming channels that you don't necessarily get, or they play in theaters for 1 week, or they go on Netflix and no one promotes them, which is what happened to Glass Onion, which, by the way, Steve, come back from our last segment, I thought Glass Onion was really fun and really good. Maybe not as good as the first Knives Out, but I think when you mentioned that you saw it in a theater full of happy laughing drunk people, that's a pretty good sign that it's a movie that should have played in theaters longer. Whether you love Glass Onion or not, it's a movie that played very well in the theater and that manipulated the audience very skillfully. And I feel like that's not being valued enough anymore. I read about this some in Movie Club, just that seeing something in a movie theater, as we all just did with M3GAN, just changes your experience of it profoundly. And that's just not me saying individual people should go to the movies, right? I mean, maybe in your particular circumstances, streaming something makes more sense. It's an argument to the industry to not throw away the money that's right there on the table for people that love to go to the movies. Yeah.
Okay, so setting aside the fact that you're dead to me now and forever for including Top Gun Maverick on this list of 15, what'd you learn by assembling this list? I mean, maybe about your own feelings about a movie that you'd already seen, and then the decision to include it reacquainted you with your love of it. But also more generally, like this is sort of an occasion for you and the best critics out there to take the state of the sort of temperature of Hollywood and the state of the industry and the medium, really, which is not at anything like an apex, especially relative to streaming TV. So on the first one, you assemble the list. What surprised you? What did you learn about yourself in this year in the movies?
Yeah, well, the list to me feels like it's a separate moment because I always publish my list in a Slate piece several weeks before Slate Movie Club even happens. But it is published as well in the first, my first post to the list links to it. What did I learn from making the list? I mean, I think for one thing, and this is just as true of any kind of artistic or creative endeavor where you're being asked to just be yourself and find your selfness, that can be one of the hardest things to do, is to let yourself just love the things that you love and not feel like maybe they're not the right ones or I haven't looked far enough. I don't think that you need to over-research things like writing a list. And I thought of this one, unrelated to the Movie Club. I did that British Film Institute Sight and Sound poll, a few months ago, which they just published the results of recently. How can you possibly look among all the films of all time and pick the 10 greatest films of all time according to any criterion other than this was special to me, this was moving to me? So that's what I go with on all these lists. Also, just as a writer, I pick things for my list that I still have something to say about because I'm going to have to write a paragraph talking about a movie that I've probably already written about, maybe podcasted about, maybe seen a couple times. So often I will leave something off just because I think I enjoyed that, I loved it, but I'm done with it and I have nothing more to say. So there has to be some juice left in that movie that you can at least get a little blurb out of it to talk about it with people. And that was the case of everything I chose. So in a lot of cases, I went back to something that I had seen very early in the year. Marcel the Shell is a good example. The animated movie, the Jenny Slate playing a little tchotchke man. That was so moving and special to me when I saw it back early in the year. I think it was in late spring or early summer. And I remember thinking it's pretty early in the year to decide this is one of the best of the year, but I'll keep it in my pocket just in case. And in fact, it was an absolute must for the list. It was just a lock, because there wasn't anything else like it all year.
And then the state of the movies. Any conclusions?
I mean, I guess I've already talked about it a bit, but something that we couldn't get away from, even though our editor Dan Coyce urged us to not talk about it so much, we couldn't help it. It's this question of where movies are happening, where they should be happening, where cinema is going to be located in the future as theatrical gets to be less and less a part of movie release strategies. That's something that film critics, it's our livelihood, right? And it's also, as I wrote a whole post about this, it's also in a way our legacy. I feel like there is a part of being a film critic that should be about advocacy in a way, advocacy for an art form that is changing really rapidly and in some ways changing for the worse and being overtaken by commerce, and that there is something to be said for being a critic as an act of fighting for the things that you love and the art form that you love, and for it to survive in a form that future generations will be able to have that experience that we're talking about, of just even laughing in a movie theater and squealing at a horror movie, right? I mean, those are profound social experiences. So that, I feel like, is something that kept on coming up in different people's posts without me even prompting them with a question about it. People would mention a specific physical memory of a movie they watched. I talked about watching Marcel the Shell sitting next to a close friend and realizing we were both crying by the end of it, right? Or I also had an entire post about a movie, a small horror release that we talked about here on the Gabfest last year. Remember The Black Phone, another Blumhouse release?
Absolutely.
And a very different feeling, not a campy movie at all, but a sort of gritty social realist movie about these underparented children in the 70s and their fear of being snatched by a serial killer. And that movie really stuck with me because it was original, because it had a voice and a mood and a tone all its own. And that's the kind of movie that I want to continue to exist in theaters. Even though The Black Phone would play perfectly fine on a small screen, it's not a big spectacle or anything like that. But it's just nice to have movies out there where you can just go to the movies and say, let's see something. Let's see something good. Nobody's talking about it. This looks good. Let's go see it. And I miss that aspect of going to movies that aren't events necessarily or big franchise releases, but are just small personal movies that have some idiosyncratic feel of their own.
I will say, reading it this year, even though you guys are still talking a lot about the economics and contours of film as an industry, it feels a little less movies are dying than the last 2 years. There's I just am thinking about the conversations we were having this time of year about Power of the Dog, which is a movie that has not aged that well in my mind, and which sort of felt to me when I was watching it like it was grabbing me by the throat and saying, like, remember cinema? Like, you sweeping vistas, like ruffles at the collars, this is a thing that humans do. They put these images on the screen and then they watch them, like, do it. Even though that movie, for all of its kind of glacial, beautiful portraits of the work that glaciers wrought upon the land. Actually, one of the things I liked about it when we talked about it was that it had a twist ending and had a plot and wasn't all just people mooning at the horizon or whatever. I don't know, you guys, there just was a lot of variety and verve. This is a year when there were a bunch of interesting horror movies that got people's butts in seats. And there was Top Gun, which, God, Steve, I think I had blacked out on how much you hated Top Gun, and I hadn't realized that your dislike had lingered. I only like it more the further away from it I get, which maybe is its own commentary. But I don't know, Everything Everywhere All at Once, it was. There's a little bit of color returning to the cheeks of the patient, it feels like, this year in the discussion. There's just a little bit more happening.
Before we go, Dana, we'd be remiss if you didn't shout out the other critics in the movie club. Who did you have this year?
Yeah, I wanted to do this because, like I said, Movie Club goes up between Christmas and New Year's. And as a result, I mean, some people, I think, go as a tradition that holiday week and read it. But I think a lot of people miss it because they're traveling, they're with family, they're doing holiday stuff. And it's all sitting there to read. It's just, 20 posts or 25 posts of really juicy, specific movie writing. And so I wanted to shout out the critics who did it this year. Benjamina Ebuehi from Vulture, who is, I call him at one point the scarecrow to my Dorothy in Movie Club. He's done it so many times and is a friend in real life. And just I have such fun, comfortable conversations with him. But I had two new critics as well, or new to Movie Club, who had never done it before. David Sims from The Atlantic and from the beloved film podcast Blank Check. And Beatrice Loaiza, who was a really good participant because she knows a lot about film history. Her prior experience includes writing for Criterion and, doing a lot of classic film writing as well as some contemporary criticism. And she brought a really great perspective. I loved her post, for example, on Blonde, the Marilyn Monroe movie, which, like me, she really detested. But she wrote about it so beautifully. So, if you want to get a real sampling of different kinds of film writing from different critics, go look at the Movie Club this year.
All right, fabulous. And as always, email us. I mean, this is a great one for you to shoot us an email on and just tell us what you saw, what you loved, what you missed, what you want to see, and where we got it wrong. All right, let's move on. All right, let's keep the lights on. Let's talk about a sponsor. Dana, what do we have?
Stephen, this podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. A lot of people listening to this podcast right now might be multitasking. Maybe as you listen, you're driving, cleaning, exercising, or grocery shopping. But there's something else you could be doing right now as you listen, getting an auto quote from Progressive Insurance. It's easy to do, and you can save money from doing it right from your phone. Drivers who save by switching to Progressive save nearly $700 on average, and auto customers qualify for an average of 7 discounts. Discounts for having multiple vehicles on your policy, being a homeowner, and more. So, just like your favorite podcast, Progressive will be with you 24/7, 365 days a year, so you're protected no matter what. Multitask right now. Quote your car insurance at Progressive.com to join the over 29 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $698 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2021 and May 2022. Potential savings will vary. Discounts not available in all states and situations.
All right, now is the moment in our podcast where we talk to you about another podcast. Dana, what do we have?
Steve, did you know that each year millions of people from around the world travel to Philadelphia to visit a pop culture icon? No, not Gritty. I'm talking about the Rocky statue. But why do so many people make this pilgrimage? And what does a statue tell us about how we memorialize some stories over others? If you want to hear answers to some of those questions, I recommend checking out The Statue, a brand new podcast from WHYY Digital Studios, which explores a monument to the most famous Philadelphian who never lived, Rocky Balboa of the Oscar-winning Rocky series. Hosted by Paul Farber, one of the nation's thought leaders on monuments, The Statue takes you from Philly to Hollywood, sharing stories of real-life boxers and exploring what it means to memorialize an underdog story. Let me just say, this podcast will transform your perspective on Rocky. So don't miss out. Follow The Statue on your favorite podcast app today and tell them I sent you.
If Franz Kafka were to reconceive the metamorphosis for our era, he might decide to ditch the novella in favor of a series of surreal TikToks. That's the grabby lead of a piece in the LA Times by Carolina Miranda. Carolina, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
You didn't hear my up top, tippy top introduction, but I called this, in my estimation, the definitive piece on TikTok, certainly of any that I've read. Congratulations. It is amazing piece of cultural journalism and criticism. So we're very psyched to have you on to discuss it.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're very, very welcome. I mean, thank you. I mean it sincerely. You get some really interesting places in the course of the essay, one of which in particular I'd love to get to eventually is TikTok is the Ouroboros of looking. It's just so wonderfully put. But let's start a little more crudely. You say that at this current moment, TikTok is in a kind of a crosshairs. Explain a little bit for our listeners what you meant by that.
Well, it is insanely popular. It is probably the most popular social media app right now with more than 3 billion downloads globally. It is also the target of the U.S. government, and that is what has put it in the crosshairs. Questions over how the amount of data that the app grabs from its users and how that data is used specifically by its Chinese-owned parent company ByteDance has put it on the roster of U.S. legislators. So there were a number of U.S. states that had banned the app from government devices over concerns related to data. And with the latest spending bill that was passed at the end of last year, it has now been banned from all U.S. government apps.
Yeah, so it's a super interesting moment for the app, but I will confess that this piece in part came out of, you have been organically spending time on the app. You are one of its 3 billion users. And, we had been talking around the LA Times culture team about sort of what is this aesthetic that everyone's spending so much time with? Like Instagram is a comprehensible aesthetic, a mockable aesthetic, a describable aesthetic. But TikTok, because its experience is so fractured, it felt like it had an aesthetic, but I had not seen any critic describe it to me or articulate it or help me understand what the heck is going on there. And I did notice you continuing to post really interesting, funny memes from TikTok. And so I think part of the genesis of this piece, it's fair to say, is me being like, Carlina, please explain it to me. What is it?
But yeah, part of the genesis of this piece is me just sitting on my couch late at night, scrolling through TikTok and sending the weirdest ones I find to my Instagram stories. So, I think it's interesting because Julia at one point did literally say to me, I'd love a piece on TikTok for you. And I really struggled with it for months because TikTok is so atomized and the content is so directed by algorithm that there's always this feeling that in writing about TikTok, you're writing about your own TikTok, but not anybody else's, because TikTok is a highly individualized experience. And so the genesis of this piece was literally me just sitting there for months and looking at videos and trying to find across this vast array of content, what are some of the similarities or echoes, the visual echoes that I'm beginning to see. And I think one of the things that struck me immediately is how, I would have these creators that I liked or things that I followed, but the way the app is designed, it almost minimizes that individual presence. Like it's more about TikTok than it is any one content creator. And the content handles are really tiny. There's very little layout around the video. In fact, TikTok gives the entire screen over to video, so it's almost like you're on a video call with someone else. And I think that was when I began to kind of get a handle on the app, that it's this feigned intimacy in a way, that TikTok doesn't put a frame around its content the way that Instagram does, or Facebook with its dull blue frames. That this was really something that felt very different from that felt more informal, that felt more intimate, and that felt a lot weirder.
Something that I don't understand as a non-TikTok user, although I see my daughter using it a lot, so I know what it looks like to have a vertical stream of TikTok videos coming at you. But I don't understand why, for one thing, and this is something you say in the piece, TikTok is more addictive or considered to be more, sticky than other social media sites. What about the algorithmic selection makes that the case? And also, this is a very broad question, but since you don't, as you say, follow people on TikTok, right? You don't create this community of fellow users the way you do in a place like Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. What happens after you dive into that stream of vertical videos? I mean, what is it choosing the next video for you based on?
Well, I think the stickiness comes from its algorithmic nature. And so what TikTok does is, it's following how long do you watch a video? Do you like the video? Do you share the video? And then it delivers similar content in that vein. So that's part of what makes it so sticky, is that I see on TikTok in a way, a lot of things that I would just never see on TV. A lot of comedians of color. I'm seeing sophisticated levels of humor that I just have not made it into a lot of situation comedy, a lot of absurdity, just a lot of things that no Hollywood executive would ever greenlight. And so I think that's part of its stickiness. It's specificity at your taste. It certainly determines a lot of that based on your navigational habits and also your phone settings. And that's also part of what makes the algorithm creepy, like your language settings, your geography, the way you are using the app, it will determine that. So I think that's the first part of why it is so appealing. And I think it's really people talk about TikTok. They talk so much, and I say this in the story, they talk about the stars of TikTok, the people with, millions of followers and hundreds of millions of followers and the TikTok collab houses. But the fact is that the spine of TikTok are the randos just delivering the weird little 10, 15 second, 30-second videos that just keep you scrolling.
I do think there's this interesting tension in what you describe here between the way in which the structure of the app de-emphasizes the content creators, but also brings them closer to you. Like, I'm struck by those two observations of, like, it's not about, oh, I'm a follower of such and such content creator, and so I'm going to go to their channel and dive deep and do, look at everything they've ever made. You're spending time on TikTok, not with a particular creator, but then also that feeling you describe in the essay of, like, one of your favorite commentators is curled up under a fleece blanket on his couch making fun of other people's TikToks, and you're curled up on your couch at home, so you sort of just feel like you're on a video call with him. Like, that combination between anonymity and intimacy feels unusual and, like, potentially oppositional, but sounds like it's actually not in the lived experience. It also felt like in your kind of multiple ways of looking at the aesthetics of TikTok, there were a couple tensions like that. So I'm kind of curious what other observations you came up with about what TikTok makes us look at and how it makes us look.
I mean, I think one of the things I wrote about a little bit was that aspect of how the app, because it's a video app and because so many of its videos are so short, really prizes this kind of manic levels of performance. And, you have to grab on TikTok, you basically have 6 or 7 seconds to grab somebody's attention. And so what you have is an app that, if Instagram sort of grabs you with its general glossiness, this is an app that grabs you with movement, with heightened commentary, with music, with these very sort of extreme moments of performance. And it's interesting because as part of the research for the piece, I listened to a lot of podcasts in which they were interviewing TikTok content creators, and a lot of them were talking about the exhaustion of what it means to come up with those segments on a regular basis. That there's almost something a little, as entertaining as it is on the receiving end of those videos, there's something a little dystopic about people having to continuously increase, sort of continuously turn up the volume on the actions they are doing in order to continuously draw attention. I think we all know that the internet and these social media companies prize content that makes us angry, that makes us more emotional, that makes us react. And in TikTok, you can see that happening. If you go to a single content producer's page, you'll see them start with something kind of mellow and then go turning up the volume on it, go turning up the volume on this performativity. And I sometimes wonder, how is that going to translate to real life? Is that why people are having meltdowns in Trader Joe's, because everything has turned into a performance? I don't know. I'm not a sociologist, but I think that there is an aspect to that that's kind of a little scary. Like, do we always have to be on, in this really extreme way?
Yeah, I mean, among the many things I love about this piece is that it gives full shrift to the idea of the internet and TikTok in particular as a kind of dystopia without it all being Luddite. You've derived so much from the medium in one sense. And the other thing I love is that to the extent the internet has been a dystopia, it's that it sort of promised to be this universal window into all of human reality, and it turns out to be this, radically narrow-casted mirror in some sense. I've been verbose in describing your piece. You're wonderfully pithy. I just have to quote, you go through and you have sort of these bullet points, these numbered points, like the TikTok aesthetic is an anti-aesthetic. TikTok's non-aesthetic promotes a perceived informality. On TikTok, you don't follow people, you follow an algorithm. But then the one that I love in particular is just so great. TikTok is an Ouroboros of looking. Expand on that one a little bit, maybe.
Ooh, that one. I always love any excuse to use the word Ouroboros in a story.
Yes.
And when the editors let me get it in a subhead, I'm like, yes. That one was, one of the most popular functions of TikTok is the duet function, in which you can place your video alongside another person's video. And one day there was this video that is super popular of that had gone viral over the summer, of this Asian man dancing in a square. I think it's unclear whether it was China or Vietnam, but it became really popular and people were duetting it. And at one point there was a button on the video that said, "See who has duetted this video." And I clicked on it and I was kind of stunned to discover that most of the duets were not people offering hammy reactions and commentary on the video. Instead, they were simply watching the video, but they had recorded themselves watching the video and then posted that video to the internet. And there was something really striking about that as much as this app encourages this manic performativity at all times, it also was this way of people reacting to other people in a way that felt more heartfelt than just clicking like or being like, oh, great, clap emoji. And there was something a little poignant about that. It's like the app, for all of its like bizarre algorithmic dystopia, has these moments of incredible poignance. And I was really struck by that, about how the function of being able to put yourself next to somebody else, looking at them as a way not of judging, but simply observing and saying, hey, I'm observing, I'm looking at you, was something that just really struck me, that about the oddness of this app. Because I think everything else, on Instagram, if I'm looking at Kylie Jenner's Instagram page, she's not looking at me, I'm not looking at her, I'm clicking like and maybe leaving a comment. This feels much more... There's something much more personable, even though it is mediated entirely by this app.
Carolina, clearly we could talk about this indefinitely, but I really want to thank you for a wonderful piece and for coming on the podcast.
Thank you.
And I urge our listeners to seek it out. That title, once again, is TikTok's Addictive Anti-Aesthetic Has Already Conquered Culture by Carolina Miranda. It's on the LA Times website. We'll link to it.
This episode of the Slate Culture Gabfest is brought to you by Rocket Money. If your New Year's goals are to manage your budget better and save money, you need Rocket Money. Rocket Money, formerly known as Truebill, is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills, all in one place. Over 80% of people have subscriptions they forgot about, like that streaming service you bought to watch just one show on, or that free trial that you never even used. I know that doing the Slate Culture Gabfest, this happens to us all the time. We sign up for free trials to watch something on some new bespoke channel, and Lord knows how many of those I have streaming through my bills as well as my devices. But Rocket Money makes canceling those subscriptions as easy as the click of a button. Just find the subscription you don't want and press cancel, and Rocket Money will cancel it for you. No more long hold times with customer service or tedious emailing back and forth. Over 3 million people have used Rocket Money, saving the average person up to $720 a year. Stop throwing your money away. Cancel unwanted subscriptions and manage your expenses the easy way by going to rocketmoney.com/culture. That's rocketmoney.com/culture. rocketmoney.com/culture.
All right, now is the moment in our podcast when we endorse. Dana, what do you have?
Steve, not to rub it in, but in honor of Julia being here in the studio with me today, I'm going to do a Julia-centered or Julia-directed endorsement because I know in the past, Julia, there was a Bach piano. It was the partitas, right?
Yep,
it was
yep.
the Bach piano partitas that I sent you down the road of as some of my favorite walking and thinking music. And you've made that some of your walking and thinking music,
I'm now
right?
among the 0.00001% of Andrew Rangel fans in the universe, according to Spotify, thanks to you. So
duking it out with me for the top spot. So we've talked before about this other pianist who I know personally. So I guess this is kind of log rolly, but really it's just that I'm lucky enough to personally know and be friends with an incredible pianist and transcriber and arranger. Her name's Eleanor Bindman. And she's done a few. Her big thing is transcribing Bach's music for piano. Bach never composed for piano, but his work was often composed for keyboard, and it works very well in that format on the modern piano. Transcribes them for piano and specifically transcribes things for four-hand piano. Her big thing is to sit at a piano with someone else and play a duet. I've seen her do this in person. It's incredible. And, you know, the four hands together do things that two hands alone couldn't do. So her latest masterwork of transcription is that she took Bach's orchestral suites, which obviously is a pretty complex piece of music involving a whole orchestra, and transcribed them for this four-hand piano format. The album, it's a double album, and you can either stream it or get it on CD. It's called J.S. Bach Orchestral Suites, transcribed for piano duet by Eleanor Bindman. And the two pianists are Eleanor Bindman and Susan Sobolewski. It's just great music. Eleanor really understands and loves Bach. I mean, I say that as if I could be somebody who would understand him better than her. All I know is I've loved Bach for decades, and he's been my favorite classical musician. And her particular style of interpretation is just one I could listen to all day. So if I were you, I would not only listen to this album, but follow Eleanor on YouTube, on whatever social media platform you're on, and just learn about Bach from her. She's amazing. She posts little clips of herself playing from time to time. She posts things about her concerts. And if you have her on your radar, you will always be listening to great music.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I'm gonna put those into all of my algorithms. I will say my listening is so influenced by you guys. I got complimented for my McCoy Tyner tunes when we had some folks over before Christmas, Steve. And also I've been listening to the Joskin Depress motets that you recommended a couple months ago.
My street find that changed my life.
Yeah, every time that my children or husband come into my office and there's just sort of like a kind of tonal chanting, they're like,
angelic monks.
They're like, what's going on in here? Like, I think it looks like I'm about to like have a ritual sacrifice before I like dig into my latest like email barrage or something. I think they find it a little bit spooky, but they are great music. So I will. I'll give this a try.
Oh, fabulous! All right, Julia, what do you have?
All right, two quick things before I endorse. I have a baking endorsement as per usual at this time of year. But before we get to it, number one, I want to say that in addition to being pro the tradition of sending a holiday card, I'm also pro abandoning that tradition on any given year that it doesn't work for your life, which turned out to be this year. We got a bunch of COVID over the holidays. Guess what? No guilt, no card this year. We'll come back to it next year. Not an obligation, just a joy. And then thing two is I mentioned on our call-in show last week that I wrote a piece about this family recipe about potato balls, and that piece is now live, and we will put a link to it in our show page. So if you want to read in slightly more personal than I usually write essay about family and tradition, we'll share the link. But speaking of family baking traditions, I also have a baking endorsement. Okay, well, I think regular listeners know that I love to bake, and we undertook a number of baking projects at the beginning of the year. And one of them was that I finally tried a cookbook that I'm pretty sure I learned about in the LA Times cooking newsletter, which is a great newsletter. And it is from a cookbook called A Good Day to Bake by Benjamina Ebuehi, who was a contestant on Great British Bake Off, which I had sort of forgotten. And I don't think of Great British Bake Off contestants as like people whose cookbooks I'm snapping up necessarily. Like, I love that show and I enjoy watching it, and I actually think I have a new season to catch up on, which is
Mary Berry has a lovely cookbook, I must say.
A delightful thing to learn about. But A Good Day to Bake, I flipped through it a bunch of times. I haven't really cooked from it because it's this really interesting
array of baking recipes that like kind of concertedly evade definition. Like there's sort of tahini and sweet things and rosemary and sweet things and molasses and savory things. And it just feels like it wants to defy your sweet, savory binaries in your mind. And it's like it got really unusual flavor combinations in it. So we made for my husband's birthday a olive oil flourless chocolate cake that you cover in a chocolate ganache frosting, which is that kind of frosting that you sort of pour over a low flat cake, and then it makes this really beautiful glossy finish. And I had never made a ganache frosting. My dad used to make a different flourless chocolate cake, so we thought we would make it for Christmas, and then we were too ambitious and had too many recipes, but I had all the ingredients on hand, so we made it for my husband's birthday. And wow, it is a good recipe. You use ground almonds. It's actually gluten-free if you want to eat gluten-free things. I love olive oil cakes with citrus. And at first, when I first tasted it, I was like, do I like olive oil with chocolate? Like, I don't not like it, but maybe this is just making me realize I want to experiment with flourless chocolate cake recipes. But it was one of those recipes that like aged really well. Like each day of the cake was like even better than the prior day of the cake. So I'm now all in on the unusual flavor combos in A Good Day to Bake by Benjamina Ebuehi. I would recommend that cookbook, the LA Times cooking newsletter, and in particular the olive oil flourless chocolate cake, which is both delicious and kind of one of those magic trick recipes where you feel like you've made something that would not get terrible marks on Great British Bake Off, despite the fact that it took you a lot longer than it would take them on that show.
That is wonderful. I'm ordering it as we speak.
Enjoy.
Okay, so yeah, thank you. For my endorsement, we have this, I think, altogether fruitless circular debate on this show, which I look forward to having ad infinitum with you two about whether generations are a real concept. And dead to me, Dana Stevens made fun of me when I said, well, the Renaissance isn't quote unquote real. It's not. The very first thing covered in my daughter's historiography class at Smith College was on whether or not periodization represents in some sense, empirically real thing, or whether it's a retrospectively applied, often highly selective and interested conceptual category, as in the Renaissance, which is one of the most famous examples of this. It wasn't until Jacob Burckhardt in the 19th century used the term and wrote a whole book, a 2-volume book about it, that anyone thought of the Renaissance as a Renaissance. People in the Renaissance did not think that they were in a Renaissance or a rebirth. So generations are a very similar thing. They're a way of conceptualizing reality. They are not reality itself. They are a product of the human imagination's need to create coherent narratives. They're real in that sense, which to me is very real as a literary critic. But anyway, that said, Zadie Smith has written a definitive essay about the movie that most stayed with me. It's not the one that I most enjoyed or most admired necessarily, but the movie that most stayed with me from the previous year, Tar.
Oh, I'm so excited to read this essay. I haven't read it yet, but I've heard about it.
In it, she treats the generations as an important conceptual category. So let me just quote briefly from it. And that was the blindingly original insight of the essay, was that this is a movie, as much as anything, about sort of the generational warfare that we're all undergoing right now. And she says, the young are always right in their indictment of the old. The boomers were right about the greatest generation. We, the Gen Xers, were right about the boomers. The millennials are right about us. Still, one wonders how these same millennials, stuck with the name that seems to enshrine the idea of their youth itself, will now deal with the imminent loss of their own. Up to now, when it comes to generational combat, they've been right about everything, as every generation is in its own way, only ever missing that one vital piece of data about time and its passing, how it feels. This essay just lands and lands and lands and lands. And it did something marvelous as well. It explained to me something I already knew with a precision and depth of feeling that I couldn't quite bring to the inchoate thought, which is why this movie lingered, even though I didn't exactly love it. So highly recommended. It's got a great title, too. Kudos to the headline writer. It's called The Instrumentalist. It's by Zadie Smith in the New York Review of Books, and we will link to it. Dana, you're not dead to me. You could never be dead to me, but on life support. Thank you so much. This was fun.
Wait, I forget. What did Dana do to you this week?
She the two of you FOMO'd the shit out of me at the top of the show. And then B,
it's an ancient grudge, Julia. He can no longer remember the origins of his hatred.
No, I can remember the origins. I can remember the backstory, the beginning, the middle, and the end. But it's really putting Top Gun Maverick on your top 15 of the year that makes us like Zoroastrian style enemies.
I just can't believe we got through our M3GAN segment without you guys comparing me to a killer robot. I didn't even get to try talking like in a slightly harmonic metallic voice. I can't really do it.
I retired that joke after just watching it thud too often from my mouth.
Because of my deep wells of humanity.
There we go. Okay,
like Allison Williams, you'd found the heart within your icy frame.
Julia, this was especially fun. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Steve. Happy New Year.
Thank you. You too. All right. You'll find links to some of the things we talked about today at our show page. That's slate.com/culturefest. And you can email us at culturefest@slate.com. Our introductory music is by Nicholas Bertel. Our production assistant is Jessica Balderrama. Our producer is Cameron Drews. For Dana Stevens and Julia Turner, I'm Stephen Metcalf. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you soon.
I'm sure all of you pop culture consumers out there know the feeling when there are so many shows, but nothing to watch. Well, when it comes to electric vehicles, variety helps. There's an EV that's right for just about any lifestyle. SUVs, sedans, hatchbacks, trucks, and more. Electric vehicles are worth watching, and SeenOnEV.com can help answer any questions. So hit up SeenOnEV.com to learn more.
Hey everybody, it's Tim Heidecker. You know me, Tim and Eric, Bridesmaids, and Fantastic Four. I'd like to personally invite you to listen to Office Hours Live with me and my co-hosts, DJ Doug Pound.
Hello.
And Vic Berger.
Howdy.
Every week we bring you laughs, fun, games, and lots of other surprises. It's live. We take your Zoom calls.
Music.
We love having fun. Excuse me?
Songs. Vic said something. Music.
Songs.
Music.
I like having fun. I like to laugh. I like to meet people who can make me laugh. Please subscribe now.